When I think about the reasons why I coach, I always think back to the time when I was a kid, and there was a guy who stepped up and decided to coach us kids who was not sitting out there banging around playing the game wrong. He had no reason to do it and gained nothing. But that had a huge impact in my life. This is Johnny's Kids, channel designed to remind all of us that the game belongs to them. Looking back into my childhood, I remember starting playing sports when I was about 5 years old. My father, who's Puerto Rican, decided to put me into playing baseball because my mom had already squashed the idea of me being a boxer. And yes, they did have boxing for 5 year olds back in 1975. At least they did in Puerto Rico. I played catcher because it seemed like a fun position to me at the time. I knew nothing about baseball. I knew about the Yankees because my father and my uncles would talk about them. And being a catcher, I logically became a Thurman Munson fan. I could play catcher fairly well. I did better at second base even, but I couldn't bat. I was awful at batting. But I do remember being 8 years old and living in the Westinghouse projects in Bronx, New York. Would explain why I was a Yankees fan. And the projects where I lived in had two parks. And when I say park, don't think grass and trees. This was pavement and concrete. A lot of skin and blood was left out there in those parks. But we would play whatever was in season, whether that be stickball in place of baseball, basketball, or football with whatever we had available that we could throw, whether that be an actual Nerf ball, a football. I think we played once with a tennis ball. When you're a kid, you find ways to make it fun. And there was a guy that was sitting out there who really all he wanted to do was just drink his coffee and read his paper and smoke his pipe. But I think on some level he saw us playing and realized they're doing it wrong. Because he stepped in and then started kind of giving his pointers and kind of what coaches do. Some kids took to it. I was one of them. Some did not, and they moved on to the other side, to the other park. That was the beginning of my experience of playing on a team. My first exposure to would what is defined as camaraderie. I was taught things like responsibility and accountability and drive and grit. Very simple lessons that were taught to me as an 8 year old. I'm 52 now at the time of this video. And those lessons still resonate in my life. Lessons that were taught to me by what essentially was a stranger. He passed away a few years later, and I found out then that he was actually a retired police officer. And really, all he wanted to do was just drink his coffee, smoke his pipe. But his contribution into my life is something that I will never be able to go back and thank him for. So when I think about why do I coach, I think about him. Now, fast forward about 15, 20 years later, I'm in my mid 20s, waiting on a friend. I see some kids playing basketball. I played basketball too growing up. And like my coach at 8, I saw that they're doing it wrong. And I felt compelled in that brief moment to say something. Hey, I think I taught them how to properly set a pick. And they started doing it. And then before I left, I corrected a couple of them saying, you can set your pick, but you can't move your feet. Otherwise, it's a foul. And they really took to that. And it took about 5 minutes of my day. And they learned something new. That moment stayed with me. And suddenly I found myself in that place where that guy was back in 1978. I have time, I can contribute, I can pay it forward. And so started my coaching adventure. And that was about, give or take, about 25, 30 years ago. Since then, I've coached as a coach with no children. I've coached as a parent. I've refereed games. And I've sat as a parent quietly and watched the disaster that was the seasons, I'm not going to lie. I was not very good when I started coaching. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was awful. By the time the season ended, I thought I was going to die. And yet I came back for more. And I honestly couldn't even tell you why, other than the fact that, as painful and as expensive as it was for me, because volunteers don't get paid, it was, you're paying for your own gear, your own equipment, your own coaching tools. As expensive as it was, as painful as it was, as time consuming as it was incredibly rewarding. At that point, all I wanted to do was just get better, because I didn't at the time realize, but I later realized, everything you do, everything you say, how you deliver your message, these kids hang on your every word, as did I when I was a child. It must be true. Coach said so, that sort of thing. And it wasn't until actually much later when I realized the impact that had, when I ran into one of my other players in a supermarket. He had already grown up and was in college at the time. And he came up behind me with a very manly voice and said, "Hey, coach." And I turned around and I instantly recognized his face in a much, much larger frame. And we talked and we laughed. And at the end of the conversation, before he left, he said, "Keep moving forward." And that really was an emotional moment for me, because those were the same words that my coach told me when I was 8. Keep moving forward, keep moving your feet, don't stop moving forward. It stayed with me, and apparently it stayed with my former player as well. It changed how I approached every team from that point forward. I believe that there are a lot of coaches out there that have kids or don't, that are still coaching for all the right reasons. And I would love nothing more than to engage in conversations with these coaches. If I can learn just one more thing, steal a different idea from them, engage in the conversations. We all should. We owe it to the kids. If that opportunity presents itself, I'm on it. I'm all over it. So please, if you have a story that you can share, if you can tell me why do you coach? Leave it in the comments. Send me an email at coachjohnny@johnnyskidz.com. I'll leave a link in the description. Let's start the conversation. Let's create the JK tribe that'll help the next generation of child athletes. Okay. If you made it this far, first, thank you so much. Also, please, like I said, send me an email, send me a shout out, leave a comment. If you leave a thumbs up, it increases the chances that somebody else may want to watch this video. If you know someone who you think might benefit from this, another parent, another coach, share it with them. Okay. And subscribe. That way, when the videos come out, you'll be right there at the front of the line. I got some other things that I'm working on right now to try to increase the channel, like a blog, possibly a podcast, possibly a Discord server, many things. But a lot of these things take time. So if you could stick around, I really appreciate your patience. But again, thank you for making it this far, and have a blessed day. With